Act 3. Interior. Don Draper's office, later. Don sits in the armchair. Pete sits in the side chair. Paul, Ken, Harry, and Sal are crowded onto the couch. Ken says, Leo Burnett invented the Marlboro Man whole cloth. They made what was a piddling lady cigarette into a billion-dollar product for all mankind and a 300% sales increase in 2 years. Pete says, Luther is interested in campaigns similar to what Leo Burnett did with Marlboro. Why not give them what they want? Because it's not what they need. Don replies, Leo Burnett and the work out of Gotham is turning clients' heads. We naturally started discussing trademark characters for Luther's, Pete says, as he looks to Harry, who raises his finger to interject. Don says, it's not what we need either. The first man to pitch a talking, cuddly critter is fired. Harry retracts his finger, makes a fist, and coughs into it. Don continues, aping someone else's idea isn't initiative. It's mimeography. The Marlboro Man is a fraud, a model-playing cowboy. If we try to come up with something like that, we're worse than frauds. Everybody loves a knockoff until everybody knows it's a knockoff, Sal says. Don keeps brainstorming. We don't need gimmicks, and we can't use false claims. We need unimpeded connections between our clients' products and consumers, something that definitively quiets the cancer fears around Luther, resets them in the public eye, and reminds all. Sterling Cooper follows no one. It needs to be simple and real and first rate at the last second, Pete adds. That's one way of putting it, but yes. The clock is ticking, Don says. Cut to interior, Fortress of Solitude medical chamber, later. Through the clear wall that divides the medical coves from the rest of the chamber, Jor-El and Lara watch Kara's labored breaths. In the adjacent cove, Brainiac's eyes shift under their lids. They awaken, panicked and confused. Jor-El says in Kandorian, Relax. You are safe. I am Jor-El. This is my wife, Lara. Kara is to your left, Lara explains, in Kandorian as well. As Brainiac rushes to see Kara, Superman hovers into the chamber in his cape and suit, out of his Don Draper disguise. He tells Jor-El and Lara, ask him who he is, and Brainiac cuts him off. I, sir, am Brainiac. I restored a relay to my ship and its planetary compendium. Its most current survey of Earth is from the 19th century. My antiquated English needs must suffice. What happened to you and Kara? Superman asks. Brainiac rattles off. I was sent years ago, from Krypton into Heaven's Fathoms, to save and catalog all intelligent life. I discovered Kara, floating in space amongst the ruins of a planet far from Krypton, in her stricken condition. Her ship was worse off. However, I managed to retrieve a degraded record. Tears well in Brainiac's eyes. They cup their hands and catch them as they fall. The tears become a pool. The pool a flat image. It shows grainy footage shot from Kara's ship of a red giant star system full of debris. Kara, healthy and whole, hovers in space before the red giant. A luminous missile fires out of Kara's ship into the star. It bleeds from red to yellow and begins to shrink. After a beat, Kara furiously flies around the planetary debris, corkscrewing around it, twisting space-time near the debris back on itself, reversing time. As Kara's flight reforms the exploded debris into a cohesive whole, parts of its core begin to glow green in the yellow starlight. Brainiac says, for some reason, she invented means to turn red stars, like the one Krypton orbits, yellow. Orbited. Krypton imploded several years ago. Kal-El was the only survivor. Lara says, it appears my sister got Kara off Krypton before it imploded, with a viable plan to save it, Jor-El counters. Brainiac says, with the full advantage of yellow starlight, Kara could repeal time and save Krypton. However, as she encircled the core of this test planet, it poisoned her. Kryptonite, a planetary ore. It's harmless near red stars, but in yellow starlight it's radioactive and lethal to us, Superman says. The recording shows Kara abruptly veer off course. The spinning core explodes back out into space. The blast consumes her ship. Brainiac says, I attempted everything within my knowledge to remedy her ailments. I tried to travel back to Krypton, but my craft became upended. I searched communications in this portion of the universe. The sole mention of Krypton led me here. I can't risk bringing her back, Superman says. Kal-El, Jor-El implores. I pray, I beseech you, you must, Brainiac demands. Superman bluntly says, get a hold of yourself. You've seen the dangers of reversing time. I've already tried it once. This is unique, Lara gently suggests. The effects costs several lives. Superman drives on. A tragic but fair bargain for those that you may save, Jor-El says. Moving Kara may kill her. Separating time and space may kill others. I won't risk what's left of her life or anyone else's, Superman says. Cut to interior, Hotel Metropolis, Steakhouse, day. Roger enters and walks up to the maitre d' just as Trudy cuts through the crowd on her way out. I haven't had the pleasure, Roger says. You won't. Pardon me, Trudy replies as she exits. Roger watches her go. Good afternoon, Mr. Sterling, the maitre d' says. Roger turns and says, Afternoon. The oak room ready? The maitre d' says, Yes, sir. Are your guests with you? Roger confidently states, No, I'll take a drink while I wait. The Luthers can be unpredictable. The Luthers? They're already here with a Mr. Daniels, the maitre d' says, starting to point. Roger abruptly stops him and says, Don't. Show me the section they're in, like we were girl watching. The maitre d' subtly motions to a table off screen. Roger nonchalantly cranes to see it. His shoulders slump, and Roger tells the maitre d', Scratch the drink, bring the bottle. Better yet, the case. Cut to interior, Julian Gallery, later. Investigating agents scour the aftermath of Superman's fight with the robots. Amanda Waller supervises and smokes. Agent Waller, any info on last night's uninvited guests? Superman says. Waller turns to see Superman has appeared behind her. She offers him a cigarette. He waves her off. She beckons him to a field table covered with evidence and metal debris. For an instant, we see through Superman's eyes as he scrutinizes it on a molecular level. Waller needles. You have to go and let them all blow up. Couldn't freeze one robot for me with your super breath so you could thaw it for examination and then have it explode? Superman asks. Waller says, Thawing dynamite exploding is an old wives' tale. Superman says, And by old wives you mean widows of men killed by thawing dynamite? Getting down to business, Waller says, Ran your description by my contacts, red, white, and blues, and the plain reds. No one's seen robots or metal like this before. Superman says, I have, just not on this planet. Cut to interior, Fortress of Solitude, medical chamber, same. Brainiac watches Kara. Jor-El materializes outside of their cove. I must see Kal-El. Convince him, Brainiac says. Jor-El calmly explains. He left. When we landed here, the humans that found Kal-El as a baby hid his heritage and us from him. They raised him as a human named Dick Whitman. Kal-El abandoned the name, but adopted the idea. To hide his identity, he now lives as a human named Don Draper. Brainiac asks, And that is where he is now? Hiding? My son has a stubborn faith in this planet and its sun. You cannot convince him. You must coerce him, Jor-El says. Without hesitation, Brainiac says, My order is to save all intelligent life. I shall do whatever Kara's salvation necessitates. Jor-El says, Extract 2 of her reproductive eggs, and I will tell you how to get my son to bring her back. Brainiac recoils. I shall not be party to such an affront. Jor-El bluntly states, It will be clinical. I will guide you. If I could manipulate his automatons, I would have already harvested them. Like you, I am a being of logic. The data is clear. Kara is dying. No amount of starlight can stop that. How may I be assured that you... Brainiac starts to ask. The only certainty is, if you do nothing, she will die, Jor-El says. Very well. I shall extract them, Brainiac says. Thank you. You are saving, Jor-El begins. Brainiac cuts him off and says, Enough. Let this be finished. Jor-El glances at the wall that separates the coves from the rest of the chamber, as it slowly rises, freeing Brainiac. Cut to interior, Paul's office, later. It's modest with a view to match. Pete sits in one of the 2 armchairs facing the desk, which Paul reclines behind. There's a couch by the door that Harry and Ken are lounging on. Draper says, Change the conversation. Luther and Cancer, us and Leo Burnett. We change the conversation. What breaks more ice than a good movie or show? Harry suggests. Paul incredulously laughs. A documentary about Luther? No. Harry curtly replies, Features or shows with plots that revolve around Luther products. Ken suggests, We can do it in Aroma-Rama. We can give people a real feeling for what it's like to be poisoned by their products. Paul says, This is tedious. If we have to do spade work, I'd prefer Envoid. Harry jests, They're close. Allegedly, Luther products stop pregnancies too. Paul adds, Get Pete a lifetime supply for his wedding. The idea of Campbell offspring is off-putting. Pete replies, "You're so witty. I can't imagine why Draper rejected all your ideas." There's a knock on the door. Hildy, a bold secretary, enters and says, "Mr. Campbell, Miss Vogel would very much like a word." "I'll have to return her call later," Pete says. "No, she's here. Now," Hildy says. Paul says, "Angry fiancé at work. Perhaps I'm not the only one getting rejected." Pete replies, "While I'm gone, drop dead twice." "And look like you?" Paul asks. "Girls say I have the face of an angel," Pete says as he stands, buttons his jacket, and heads out into interior, Sterling Cooper, executive floor, continuous. Pete cuts through the bullpen. Trudy waits at his office door. As he arrives, they kiss with forced smiles. "Honey, whatever are you doing here?" Pete asks. "You said, meet you at my favorite restaurant, then stood me up," Trudy says. Pete says, "There's an emergency here. I had Hildy call the Hanover." Trudy says, "I was at the Hotel Metropolis." Pete stammers, I'm terribly sorry. Go treat yourself for me." Trudy objects, "I know this trick. What have you done? What did you desperately need to tell me?" Pete says, "We'll discuss it later." Trudy almost yells, "Peter Campbell!" Pete quickly and discreetly ushers Trudy into interior Pete's office, continuous. It's the same size and setup as Paul's, but the view and decor is slightly better. Pete shuts the door behind them. "Would you keep your voice down?" Pete says. "I am not going until you talk, and if you leave me here, I'll scream," Trudy declares as she plops onto the couch. Pete considers this. He opens his door, glances around outside, then shuts and locks it. "You can't tell anyone this," Pete starts. "All right. Peter, what is it?" Trudy asks. Pete rambles. "Superman champions the underdog. As a kid, I wanted to do the same. I wanted to rebel against my parents. They're rich friends. I stole from them and gave it to others. I was the Gold Raider." Trudy dismissively says, "Peter, you shouldn't make fun. It's true. I was the Gold Raider," Pete says. "The thief with the masks and guns?" Trudy asks. Pete clarifies, "The vigilante, yes, but I quit, and I met you, and I've been going to help meetings in Gotham to be safe. No one else knows this but you." "You robbed my Poppy Pop!" Trudy yells as she lurches up, slaps Pete in the face, and exits. "No! Trudy, wait!" Pete calls out as he follows her into interior, Sterling Cooper, executive floor, continuous. Trudy storms through the bullpen. On her way out, she nearly knocks over Becky, the young black woman working her first day on the switchboard. Pete starts after Trudy, but realizes Becky and the other employees are watching. They avert their eyes as Pete collects himself and returns to his office. Cut to interior, Sterling Cooper, executive floor, reception area, continuous. Joan and Dr. Rock sit on a couch just inside the entry. As they speak, Trudy passes them on a beeline out of the office. Dr. Rock says, "Is Holloway Catholic or Protestant?" "A little of both," Joan says. "And yourself?" Dr. Rock asks. "Too little of both, or so my mother thinks," Joan says, half joking. "Pardon my prying, but a woman of your caliber didn't finish school with an MRS?" Dr. Rock asks. "I finished school, but I did not get rung into the Mrs. Degree program," Joan replies. Don enters. Joan and Dr. Rock rise. "Dr. Rock, you're quite early," Don says. "Miss Holloway offered to contact you. I insisted against it. She's very kind," Dr. Rock says. With effortless charm, Joan says, "It was my pleasure, Doctor." "It was all mine," Dr. Rock replies. He continues, "I do hope you reconsider the church and that degree. Those 3 letters on your name add a lovely ring to it." Unfazed, Joan says, "If you'll excuse me, I must get back to work. The boardroom will be ready in just a few minutes." "Thank you, Miss Holloway. Dr. Rock, please join me in my office," Don says. Dr. Rock waves as Joan leaves, then turns to Don and says, No, that won't be necessary. I came because I'm sorry, but I don't believe Envoy belongs here." "Because of last night? He was going to attack you. I had no choice," Don says. "We always have a choice," Dr. Rock tells him. Don says, "Sorry if I've offended you. Surely you believe in second chances." Unswayed, Dr. Rock says, "I just don't think we share sensibilities. Good day." As Dr. Rock turns to leave, Roger comes in through the entry. Don crosses to Dr. Rock, holds his gaze for half a beat, and then says, "Sorry this didn't work out, Doctor." They shake hands. Roger holds the door as Dr. Rock exits, then turns to Don and says, "What happened?" No, never mind. I've had my fill of Draper's capers." Don explains, "It was out of my hands." "Said Brutus," Roger says. He continues, "When the Luthers are in town, we have a standing lunch. I show up today and they're already eating with Draper Daniels from Leo Burnett in Gotham." "Leo Burnett has Marlboro. That's a conflict with Luther tobacco products," Don says. "The Marlboro contract is nearly up and Luther is the bigger get," Roger explains. "Wait, who paid?" Don asks. "You think I broke out a table leaf and strapped on a feed bag? Who paid?" "We did," Roger says. "Can we actually find out?" Don asks. Roger stares at him for a beat, then walks away. "Johnny!" Roger shouts as he booms off down a hallway. Don rounds the corner into interior, Sterling Cooper, executive floor, continuous. The bullpen is nearly empty. A few employees are at their desks. Jimmy is at his, eating. As Don approaches, he tries to quickly put away his lunch. "Please, finish. I'll be in my office. No calls or disturbances," Don says as he swiftly enters. Interior, Don Draper's office, continuous. Locking the door behind himself, Don quickly draws the blinds over each window. In his haste, one becomes entangled, allowing a shaft of light in. Ignoring it, Don thumbs a tiny crystal on his belt buckle and is suddenly transported into Interior, Fortress of Solitude, Crystal Solarium, continuous. It's a sizable room made of the same material as the medical chamber. A large array of crystals fills its center. Sizes and designs vary, but they all float in a wide shaft of light that beams down from the ceiling onto the floor. Several identical versions of Superman's suit line one wall, hanging in similar shafts of light. There's also a collection of business suits and casual clothes on another. As Don heads for the array, Jor-El and Lara materialize. Jor-El cries, "No! Kal-El, don't!" Lara yells, "Kal-El, go back!" Brainiac cuts through their images with a large and radiant chunk of green rock, kryptonite. Don kneels in severe pain and asks, "How?" "Jor-El mistakenly judged me vile enough to steal Kara's eggs. I saved and cataloged this kryptonite from Kara's misfortune," Brainiac says. "I won't. I can't bring her back," Don says as Brainiac approaches. Don collapses in agony. He strains for his buckle, but Brainiac smashes the kryptonite into his face, stabbing it into his temple. Don's skin blisters. "Release my son!" Jor-El shouts. "Killing him will get you nothing," Lara adds. "How can you allow her to perish?" Brainiac asks. Lara glances at a nearby wall. Several containers and trays melt out of it. They fly across the room and bombard Brainiac. Unharmed, they knock them away. Near exhaustion, Don strikes Brainiac with just enough force to knock them off balance. Brainiac counters by driving the kryptonite into Don's face with a horrible crack. Blood rushes from his broken nose. Brainiac tries to strike him again, but Don grabs their arm and says, "I won't endanger more lives." Brainiac says, "Kara is the highest form of life on this world." Brainiac begins to overpower him. Don uses the momentum to toss Brainiac aside. The kryptonite bounces free as they hit the ground. Brainiac crawls after it. Don strains to hit the crystal on his buckle and is suddenly interior, Don Draper's office, continuous. Don writhes on the floor. Mustering his strength, he struggles toward the covered windows. Unable to stand, he claws at the ground with bleeding fingernails. His body begins to convulse. He rolls himself into the single shaft of light cutting through the blinds. Just as the ray strikes him, his eyes shut and we black out. End Act 3. To be continued.